All right, welcome back to another episode of Asset Coach and Tax Strategist. I've been doing some videos and episodes on California and people leaving California to Texas and all that fun stuff that's happening here. And I've done some episodes on China and really understanding the effect or the conversation about China being a world power and all that. There's been a lot of news starting to come out more and more. Because of that, I feel like this is an important topic for us to address. I'm also going to share with you guys Peter Zeihan. He has written 3 or 4 books on this matter specifically. So I'm going to play his YouTube video. We'll include his link to that video in ours, so you can go see him directly. Go to his channel as well on this topic. He does more stuff on politics across the board, not just China and US. So I have found him recently, and I have found his information to be very good and reliable. But before we do that, I wanted to go into Financial Times, their article that just came out about this specific topic. And so we'll go through that first, and then we're not going to spend a ton of time. I'd like you to spend more time on the video and kind of figuring out what this means to us. And again, it goes back to what I've said before and reiterated over and over again, is the United States is the world power. The human history has not seen a more powerful and wealthy nation ever since this moment, at least since the flood. We don't know a lot pre-flood except for what's in the Bible and other writings, but at least right now, this is the most. And to think about and to look at, every generation has America is crumbling type conversation. We're having that same conversation now. There's always something, and my belief is that fear, that chaos is designed to keep us in control, keep that fear, and that's what the people of power do. But at the end of the day, we're still here. And as if you're a believer, if you believe in God, then your final destination is not necessarily here in America or on Earth, right? So our final destination is with our God. And I'm a Christian, so I believe that my final destination, I'm reaching and trying to strive for the benefits and the kingdom of heaven, and that's what I'm striving for. So this is just a fleeting period of time, and that's my belief, and you can believe whatever you want to believe. That's perfectly fine for you, but at the end of the day, there has nothing been like America. The transparency, the effect around the world, and not just at any point in time, America go conquer things. We can go conquer everything if we wanted to, and be completely satisfied with it. But that's not what America does. Now, I know that's what other areas say that we're doing, and we're occupying them and all this kind of stuff. If we occupied them, you would know that we're occupying you. That's not what America does. America is there to create police, so to speak, the world. And you have and without really affecting certain areas. Now, yes, don't worry, I'm not naive. I know we affect who gets elected in other areas because we've just seen how it affects us in the United States. But what I mean by that is that we're not colonizing other areas. Now, we are from a currency perspective. There needs to be, in order for the world and other countries to have the ability to trade, there needs to be a certain rule or foundation. And yes, America has established that in the various entities that are out there. But at the end of the day, there are flaws to everything. And so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, that we're perfect and that we're always right. Not at all. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying that even in our imperfectness, we are still the best country there is. And the things that you and I do on a day-to-day basis give us that America gives us that opportunity, gives us that ability. And other people in other countries have opportunities because of this as well. Again, not perfect and not always right. So totally get that. And I'm not naive from that perspective. But let's take a look at here in Financial Times. Okay, Western companies take slow steps towards China de-risking. And what does this mean? This basically means, and you can see the link to this article. You may not get access to this article because you have to be a subscriber. But if you do, anyways, we'll put a link down there. If you want to subscribe, go subscribe, whatever. But at the end of the day, look at here. While a number of companies such as U.S. toy maker Hasbro have already been moving manufacturing out of China. In my previous episode, I was talking about Mexico. Mexico has now been the greatest exporter to the U.S. in recent times, and before they were that before China, and then China took that over. But we're going back to other countries. The vast majority are still weighing their options, which I'm not sure why you're weighing your options. The writing is on the wall. You need to get the heck out as quick as you can. Which range of partial divestments to delayed spending decisions and ways to make their China operations disruption proof by having them serve only the Chinese market. Okay, so what they're saying is that Hasbro is going to take out manufacturing that's going to manufacture for the rest of the world, but we may leave manufacturing in China just for China. Okay, hey, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. And if China doesn't buy, then it affects that manufacturing, affects those citizens and those employees of that particular country. But we in America, in the rest of the world, aren't relying on those goods and services being produced in China for the rest of the world. I think that's very important. Europe is still thinking about what de-risking is and how to implement it in practice. And if they think too long, guess what? They're going to continue to be behind in the economic race, so to speak. Over the past years, there's been much more private sector talk, localization strategies as a form of de-risking, but it takes several years for investment to come to fruition. Not if you take action. You got to do something. You got to do something other than just sitting around and thinking about it. These articles are popping up everywhere. Wall Street Journal was just talking about it, so it's. I just find it interesting. So Wall Street Journal just came out with. And I am not a subscriber. Well, I am a subscriber, not to the Premier. But China's business environment is deteriorating, U.S. companies say. So it is on the writing is on this proverbial wall, so to speak. And so let's take a look at this gentleman. Again, this is Peter Zeihan, and I want you to kind of get an idea and a feel for what's happening here. And again, the link to his channel will be below. If you subscribe, fine. I don't get any benefit or anything like that. Just wanted to share his information.
Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from home in Colorado. And if you haven't been blind and even marginally aware of international news, you know that the information out of China these past few weeks through July and August and September has just been atrocious. Consumer spending is down, lending is down, which should never happen in a country that is just capitally driven.
Okay, what did he say? These things should never happen with a country that is capitally driven. Okay? Keep that in mind.
Basically forcing capital to everything, and so lending should always be going up, and it's not. We've had
lending in the United States is constantly going up. And so that's one of the things that, one side of the conversation is that, America's debt is too high. Well, debt is what allows the progression. And so debt, what does debt mean? Is debt from banks? Is debt from investors? Is debt from, where is the debt from? And that lending allows capital to go into a market, and that market that receives that capital can use that capital to be productive and create goods and services that return capital, right? Revenue turns into incomes, turns into taxes, turns into profit, turns into spending. Okay. So lending, debt, capitalization is vital. That's why one of the things when the economy is going down or there's a recession, what does the Fed do? Is that they lower interest rate, the cost of debt, or they print money, they put capital into the market. Okay, so very, very important distinction here in understanding this.
The foreign minister go missing and then be dismissed, the same is now happening for the defense minister or the head of the missile forces. The information that's coming out about youth unemployment is atrocious, so they just stopped collecting the data altogether. Information on bond transactions is gone. If you're going to try to get into a more sustainable economic structure, you obviously need a bond market. They're not collecting information on patents anymore. So supposedly the moving up the value-added scale that the Chinese have been talking about for years is now not even part of the plan.
This is important. Not collecting patent data. Okay. And most people don't think about this as the future growth of an economy, but patents, research and development, creation, development, and protecting that creation, protecting that development through registered patents and trademarks with the government. The government tracks that, but it also gives you as the individual or the company that creates that research and that new patent, gives you the ability, a period of time to turn that into revenue and capital and get a return on that. Okay, so collecting patent data is very important and vital to the growth in the future of an economy of a country.
It feels like we're looking at a broad-scale societal and economic and political breakdown, and we are. The shock, though, is that this is all happening at once. And after years, if not decades, of the story of rising China and hearing that from Beijing and oftentimes from political parties in the United States and around the world, for it to all of a sudden go completely inverted, seems like quite a shock. But
now, here's the thing, before he dives into the but, one of the things you've heard me say in my previous episodes is transparency, right? Transparency. Even though over the years we've talked about the rise of China, and the Chinese and the China is going to perform, is going to beat out America as the most protected. But remember, it only exists because of the consumerism of America. Not even Europe doesn't consume as much as America does. Okay, which is why America is so wealthy, is because it's that movement of cash from hand to hand to hand that creates the production. Cash just sitting there, sitting on a table, doesn't do anything. It has to be moving. And the more cash moves, the more productive it is, the more the wealth and creates that debt and that capital. But there has to be a transparency to that. And that's what he's talking about here, is that even though China's been talked about being so dominant and growing in the economic race, so to speak, there's not a lot of transparency. And that's the issue that I've continued to talk about, is the issue.
Here's the thing. It hasn't all been happening at once. It's just that this is when we're noticing it. If you look back on the last few years, things have been odd in all things China.
True.
So first, let's deal with this from the outside point of view, and then from the inside point of view. So outside, think of what's gone on the last few years. We've got the Ukraine war. We've got the Iranians on the warpath. We had 4 years of the Trump administration. We had 2 years of a more internally focused situation in the Biden administration. The Europeans were dealing with the tail end of their financial crisis. The Japanese have been preoccupied with the remilitarization program. Everyone has been dealing with their own stuff. And it's only kind of now that the noise out of China has gotten so loud that we're even noticing that it's not good news anymore. As for the Chinese, two big things. Number one, COVID. For 3 years, it was nothing but COVID, and any sort of statistical release or news out of China was always viewed through the eyes of COVID. And even if there was bad news, you could always lay that at the altar of COVID. Consumption was down. Clearly, that's COVID. Problems with supply chains. That's clearly with COVID. Problems with linking their industrial production to needs in the wider world. That was because we adjusted our consumption because of COVID. And so we're only...
Notice he said adjusted our consumption. And what companies started to realize is that when China kept talking about COVID and kept doing the things in the zero tolerance policy of COVID, a lot of that caused us as consumers and the companies that provide products and services to consumers to say, hey, we can't do this again. What if this happens again? And that's what we do in our planning at Terra Firma, is that when we work with our clients and our businesses, we go with the mindset of let's learn from history, not be history. And that's what he's talking about here. And so this is what's so great about America, is that even though we repeat history, we try to learn from history, but that as a larger, but what about as a smaller microcosm of us citizens try not to repeat history? Government and big institutions repeat history. Okay. They can't get out of their damn way. Right. But you and I have control over that. And so this is really important information and to understand from that standpoint, and that this is happening for a while, and we've been slowly moving and shifting manufacturing, because again, what drives the revenue and the profits drives us investors that invest in these public companies. It's all tied together. So as a public company, it's your responsibility, if you're gonna continue to be a CEO and get paid what you get paid, and have employees and have good news, you need to continue to sell your product and services. So you have to make decisions to allow that, because you have investors and shareholders and bondholders and other people that are relying on you to do what you say you're going to do, and can keep doing it. And then we all benefit from that. That's what I mean by the transparency of America, is we're all linked together in somehow, some way. So if one area is affected, it affects all areas. That's why when the economy starts going down, we start going into a recession, we see the effect in other areas. The same thing with what he was talking about with COVID. During that period of time, we saw the effect of how it affects all of us.
Now kind of getting first good look after years of COVID. And then also within the Chinese system, they've had a significant shift. When Chairman Xi, he started a series of purges under the guise of an anti-corruption campaign. And in his first 5 years, he removed every regional power center so they could never rise to national prominence. And then he went through and gutted the two factions of the previous presidents, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, that put him in power to make sure that they could never come back. And then he spent...
Does this sound familiar? This is what communists do. This is what communists do. It happens in every communist country. Not to get political, but this is part of politics. This is geopolitics. This is what he does. Think about what's going on in our country. Think about what has happened in the previous election, the midterm elections, and what's happening right now. What is occurring right now is exactly what the communists do.
But the last couple of years, gutting the bureaucrats and the private sector of anyone who might be able to rise to national prominence. As part of that, he's removed sorts of data collection to make sure that they can't assist anyone from rising. So, for example, college dissertation, the information is not published anymore. It's probably not even collected anymore, so no one can take the economic route to prominence. And political biographies are no longer put together by the state. So any sort of local politician or younger politician has no way to rise in a situation that might down the road generate a potential rival. So we've seen this ever-tightening information vacuum across the Chinese space. All of these things have been going on for 5 and 6 years. And during that 5 and 6 year period, we hit an inflection point that was absolutely the high point of the Chinese system. And that's largely demographic. We still don't have what I would consider to be truly accurate information, but the most recent full data to be released by the Chinese in the last 2-3 months tell us that the birth rate has dropped in China by nearly 70% since 2017. That's the...
So imagine that. Okay, I'm gonna come back to this. Sorry, hang on a second.
The fastest drop in the historical record, not of China, of humanity throughout all of recorded history.
Okay, for a country that was only allowing one child per family, okay, even today, and they opened up and they said, we're no longer going to control that. But even since 2017 to now, a 70% decrease in birth rates. So that means they have an aging population. Their unemployment of youth is at its highest that it's ever been, which none of that should occur. So very, very important what he's talking about right here. Very important, which is probably why a lot of the wealthy in China saw the writing on the wall and are trying to get their money out of China. And how do they do that? They do that by buying real estate in other countries. This is why the West Coast, and this is really probably the only benefit to California anymore, is the economics of Chinese money coming and buying real estate now that concerns me about the real estate market moving forward in the West Coast, especially in California, because it's benefiting, and there's a wave of happening. So you have money in China coming to buy cash for properties in California. If you're in California, you know this to be true. And what happens is that people who've been living in California for 10, 15, 20, 30 years are now exiting California because of the political environment and what's been going on. And plus their kids have left the state because they can't afford to be in the state. So their kids are being rooted in other areas of the country and having grandkids. So what are happening to the generation is that they're selling their house and someone's buying it for cash. They bought it for, or the house for $250,000, and now they're selling it for 900 to $1 million or whatever it is. And now they're going to move farther east, wherever. So they're going to Idaho, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado. They're going to Texas. They're going to Tennessee, North and South Carolina. They're going everywhere. Okay, and that's affecting the real estate market in those areas because they're flush with cash, so they're able to buy things. So when they're normally going to be more conservative of, can we afford this house, they may buy something that's a little bit more, but they'll get more house for a lower cost, and that's going to drive those economies up as well, those real estate markets up. But this is very important because this has been happening for a long period of time. And so why are they buying real estate? Because it's hard asset. You can't take it away, right? And so this is very important. And the birth rate is the future of any country. And that's why immigration in the United States is an important aspect of the growth of the United States now and into the future. But the immigration issue right now is the lack of documentation and control. There needs to be some sort of control as to where we can keep track of what is occurring in the immigration, so we understand where services, public services and needs need to be met, because that's where tax dollars go, and that's how we budget things. So not to get into the politics of immigration or anything like that, but again, it's all connected. This is very important, especially when you're looking for transparency.
And in that time frame, if the Shanghai Academy of Sciences is right, they've overcounted their population by over 100 million people, all of whom would have been working age people under age 40, meaning that in the last 5 or 6 years, they've had not just peak workforce in the last year, peak workforce is probably the earlier part of that process, and they just don't have enough millennials to do consumption at all. And we've seen the cost of the workforce increase by a factor of 14 or 15 in the last 22 years. So
he said consumption. You don't have young people to consume. What am I saying about America? So birth rate drives consumption. Think about that. When you're a married couple, you have a child, you have to consume things to be able to care for that child, right? As that child gets older and it gets into young adult age, gets out of college, gets in the workforce, now they're a consumer and a consumptionist, and they now have entered the economy. You as parents, have you stopped consuming? No, your consumption has changed because you're older and you have changed, but now the parents have created another consumer, another consumptioner, okay? And if you had just one child, or have you had 2 or 3 children? If you've had 3 children, then you have 3 consumers out of the 2. So this is important because when the parents die, what's left over? 3. So you're ahead by 1. So that's why it's important when we look at birth rates in America for families to have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, and certain religious families and families that are faith believers believe in having children, having a family. And so that is very healthy for the future of a country's success and to be able to thrive.
In the last 5 or 6 years in China, if you could somehow have a crystal ball enough access to all the data, especially the stuff they're not collecting anymore, we would see that they've already fallen off the cliff. And it's only in the last few months that it's become so obvious that it's cut through the clutter and the noise and the preoccupations we all have with everything else in our lives. And now it's obvious that the system is breaking down. The demographic collapse is not correctable. There are not enough people under age 40 for them to even try, even if they had the macroeconomic structures that allowed or encouraged people to have families of their own. And we're seeing an ever increasing rate of decline in terms of their industrial competitiveness. On top of that, we have the issues with the Ukraine war, with China starting to come into the crosshairs of sanctions. We have China being more and more exposed to energy and food insecurity because the Europeans have taken everything else that is proximate to them so they don't have to use Russia. And the infrastructure between Russia and China is so thin, that stuff has to go out west past Europe, through Suez or around Africa and around India and around Vietnam before getting there, making it the most exposed supply lines in the world. So we're going to see more disruptions moving forward based on what's going on in China with demographics and political ossification. And we're almost certainly going to see disruptions in their ability to access the wider world for trade and merchandise exports. And that's before you consider that the Biden administration is the most protectionist administration the United States has had, at least in a century, far more so than Donald Trump. So the Chinese are getting hit from every single angle. And Chairman Xi has so purged the system that it's an open question whether he can even become aware in a reasonable amount of time that something needs to be done, much less have the capability to come with coherent policy to deal with whatever the issue is as it arises. So, demographic.
So we'll stop there. If you want to watch the rest of the video, there's another 2 minutes left on the video, but I just wanted to go share this with you because I think it's so important, and that's what this channel is about. Asset Coach and Tax Strategist. How does this affect you and I? I think it just creates opportunity. When I hear things like this means there's opportunity. So if you're a business that's providing products and services to other businesses, to consumers, keep doing it. Figure out how can you enhance that and increase that. If you're thinking about getting into business, maybe you want to think about getting into an area of business that encourages the consumerism, the manufacturing, the supply chain, the aspect of this area, because it's going to create more and more opportunity. Now, Mexico is the largest exporter, so that's fantastic. But what's happening to South America? There's more and more people leaving South America, Central America, into the United States. Okay, so they're not staying in Mexico and working in Mexico to provide goods and services to the United States and the rest of the world. Okay, they're trying to get into America. So eventually what's going to occur is that Mexico is going to tap out. They're not going to have enough people to work. Their workforce, that's what was so great about China, is they had a workforce that was a huge population of workforce. It was cheap labor because of the Communist Party and because of the way they ran their things. But now we're going to have multiple countries involved in manufacturing. And so you're going to have different deals and agreements between the United States and these countries. So you and I as businesses can transact with these countries to create manufacturing goods and products and services for you and I. So this all comes down to where inflation may continue to be steady at 4 or 5% because we're losing the cheapest manufacturing workforce because of what they have done there in China. Okay, this is the whole purpose of why manufacturing left the United States, is because increased costs of goods and services to manufacture here in the United States because of inflation and because of how we consume. So this is real. This is real. This is why it's so important when you look at your assets and you're trying to figure out your financial plan and you're trying to figure out what to do. Why you have to have a tax strategy in place, why you have to have multiple assets in place, not just your business, not just equities in the stock market, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You have to be in areas that allow you for consistent growth, allow you to have a diversification. This is not investment advice. This is all for educational purposes. But at the end of the day, these are things that we as business owners have to be thinking about. As taxpayers, we have to be thinking about. Okay, we need to be proactive. So thanks again for watching. If you like this content, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't like this content, give us a thumbs down. If you don't care, give us a thumbs up. Add some comments if you choose, and we just greatly appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, and can't wait for the next episode. So have a great day. Bye bye.